Welcome back. It is Thursdays Off the Ball. Nathan with you until 10 o'clock. Football show coming up at 9. We'll be talking with Andy Mitten and checking in with everything that's going on at Manchester United, where there have been yet more leaks from the United dressing room. Gavin Cooney is going to be alongside me in the studio as well. We're going to be looking at the Republic of Ireland squad that Stephen Kenny will pick in a couple of weeks' time. Who's in form, who's out of form, who should be getting a chance. So all that coming your way after 9 o'clock. There is live football tonight, by the way. Everton are taking on non-league Bournemouth in the FA Cup. That is the last 16 of the FA Cup. That game just getting underway. And the winners of that game will play Crystal Palace in the quarterfinals. The draw just took place a few minutes ago. Elsewhere, Nottingham Forest or Huddersfield will take on Liverpool. It's Middlesbrough against Chelsea and Southampton against Manchester City. Now, let's talk hurling. Eddie Brennan is on the line. Evening, Eddie.
Good evening, Nathan. How's the form?
I'm well. A lot to talk about in the hurling league. Well, I think there is, because it feels as though there's something happening at Limerick, but maybe we're just reading too much into the fact that they've lost their 3 games, and it's wishful thinking that the chasing pack is getting that little bit closer. Is it wishful thinking?
Yeah, it's hard to know. I suppose it's a bit of everything, really. I think it's shown that after last year's performance in the All-Ireland final that they are human after all. I think, I suppose there's a lot of discussion around it, saying, is pressing do we press the panic button yet? But John Kiley is a shrewd operator. Right? I don't think he'd be pressing the panic button just yet. I think if you were to even look at, the teams that Limerick have put out in the matches so far, if you had maybe 8, 9, 10 of your All-Ireland performing team, that's about the height of it. So from what I'm looking at, he's integrating 3 or 4 new young lads every day, guys that are on the periphery of the squad. He's giving them their go, and then he's mixing and matching some of his experienced guys. So there's a few little habits creeping in that I'm sure he'd like to weed out quickly enough.
What are they?
Performance. Well, sure. Look, I suppose everyone is talking about the discipline side of it, but I don't think it's the crisis maybe that they're making it out. I mean, I think in some ways, if you look at last weekend, for example, and I suppose one of the key things we always talk about now with the modern players is their in-game awareness and their smarts and what's going on and what's happening. And I think equally, if you look at both red cards, I'm saying Shane Kingston doesn't really need to commit to that tackle initially on Sean Finn. He's winning well, he's flying, he's going well. So you're kind of measuring your tackles. I mean, and the same with Shamie Flanagan. If I'm wearing a Limerick jersey last Saturday or Sunday when that happens, and Cork are winning, they're dominating, and they get a man sent off, well, the one thing you don't do is kind of rush into a tackle. And look, it happens. It's a mistake. Sometimes it can happen. But you're looking at throwing your team a lifeline there. And I think it's more that. It's the mindset maybe that would probably bug John Kiley a little bit, saying to Shamie Flanagan in that, one-on-one chat afterwards, Jesus, you can't do that. You need to be smarter than that. You need to be cleverer than that. You need to be thinking of the team. And, I think the little habits that I'm referring to is maybe that we need to tidy up our tackles in terms of, we always talk about disciplined tackles, getting your tackles right, being hunting the ball and not being kind of, as a player, I suppose, we often talk about, and I'm guilty of some occasionally criticising refs, but if players give a referee a decision, they have nobody to blame but themselves. And that's the reality. So if you fly into a tackle and you put your hands up high or you wrap a fella around the neck, you're now leaving yourself vulnerable. And they're the little habits. I think the habit of obviously losing is something that he would like to cut that out straight away and clear it in Ennis the weekend. What better way to maybe get back on the horse?
Would you put any of it down to just finding their fitness at the moment? Just been a little bit off in the tackling, even in terms of the bit of discipline, that like frustration kicks in a lot quicker when the other team are maybe a step ahead of you. That it does feel as though the round robin series has, I don't want to say killed off the league, but it's made it much more difficult to analyse the league, because like these teams need to be almost at full cylinders from mid-April on, and Limerick understandably should have gone and enjoyed their success. That all of it's just feeding into a few little things that actually, once they're up and running, will just fall away.
Yeah, perhaps. I think that's the really important point, Nathan. I think there's a combination of a number of factors, and you're probably talking about dropping off 2 or 3% maybe on each one, and it's just the accumulation of that then is where the bad habits creep in. And I suppose that's probably first and foremost one of the big things that the management team will be looking at doing. Say, okay, we'll be cognizant of the fact that we're probably not as fit or as sharp as we can be. But, and they're probably doing a heavy load during the week. So therefore, those polished performance maybe that we associate with Limerick might not be there during the league. And that's not the biggest, problem in the world either for a manager or for a group of players. But I think once the endeavour is right and you're getting to a point where you're saying you're tidying things up. And again, look, I think if Limerick, the league semi-final now is probably out of their reach. Is that going to bother John Kiely? I don't think it is. I think he'll get a nice block of 2 or 3 weeks in the lead into championship where he will have these guys on their own. He's also probably trying to get a few guys in on that, get a bit of experience. But on that point, I think for Colm Coughlin maybe, or, even Colm O'Neill, these guys, getting a game. If you're getting into, breaking onto an inter-county team, and you have, Declan Hannon to your left, Sean Finn behind you, Dan Morrissey, Dara Donovan in front of you, further up the field in front of him, you have Tom Morrissey coming back helping you out. That's not a bad way to integrate yourself in on a team. But when you're playing with a team where there's, maybe a new midfielder in front of you, a novice midfielder in front of you, another one behind you in the corner, they're just little things that can make that step up a little bit more tricky. And I think John Kiely has tried to give the guys game time and balance it between having, his tried and trusted crew, maybe, giving them a little bit of a kind of a fright, and maybe the odd time where he likes to put a little shot across the bow. But some of these lads he has shown before, he's not afraid to drop a lad. And I think ultimately what John Kiely wants is that mad competition for places, competition for jerseys that has, his more established crew a fear their life of losing that jersey.
Will he be disappointed then, Eddie, that maybe he hasn't got that? Because I was listening to the hurling pod with Paul Murphy and James Skehill, and Paul was talking about that, about the young players that he was bringing in and that they haven't really proven themselves yet. And are we overestimating the strength and depth of this Limerick squad?
I know. Look, if they were good enough to be playing, it's that simple. And it was said about, I suppose maybe our group. It was something that was said once upon a time with us that there was, and there is equally good fellas there on the bench. But when you're thinking of, you can maybe, whatever, Tom Morrissey's injured someday or one of your wing backs, and you can drop in a guy. And like I said, he has the comfort of 7 or 8 experienced guys all around him, and that's different. But when there's 4 or 5 of them playing one in each line, that's a little bit different. That's a little bit harder because, you're now maybe having to step up a little bit more. And yet you can say maybe they're not ready just yet. But I do think, someone like Colm O'Neill is plenty good enough. I think he has shown that. And I do think, the point I want to make there, I suppose the equally important one is there are certain fellas, obviously, too, within that Limerick team. You have obviously 15 very strong guys and a couple of good lads on the bench that they have. But there's certain guys within that core then that they just can't be without. And I think Cian Lynch, maybe, Declan Hannon with the 2 guys, Burns and Hayes either side of them, having, certain guys there, they provide leadership. They take the pressure off maybe other lads there. So I think what you're seeing is that if certain guys aren't in certain positions, definitely there's a vulnerability about them. But obviously, look, that will be what John Kiely will want, is that he'd like 1 or 2 new faces coming in because he has Peter Casey to replace. But it's a balancing act really, and some are ready to go, some maybe not so much. Others then you're looking at your match day strategy and saying, look, maybe he's good for 10 or 15 minutes if we get him coming down the straight.
Yeah, and they've plenty of experience of making sure they peak at the right time, so I don't think anyone's going to be writing them off just yet.
I wouldn't be too worried.
Go for it, Eddie. Write them off right here, right now. It'll make a nice little promo for the summer for us.
Yeah, definitely.
So they go to Ennis on Sunday to take on Clare. Cork are flying it. Put 219 on Limerick last time out. 3 wins from 3. There's always a fear when a team loses an All-Ireland final in the way that Cork did, that it would be such a blow to confidence that it's going to be hard to come back to regroup. But they are building on getting to that All-Ireland final. The style of play is Limerick-esque, and in terms of moving past the defeat, how important was that victory, do you feel, over Limerick?
Yeah, it's important. I think it's like anything. I think when you get a good clipping like they did, and I think, even when you look back on that, reflect on that All-Ireland last year, they seem to have got stage fright. They seem to have got spooked. And a performance or an experience like that either makes or breaks you. And I think when you sit down as a group and with your management and there's a little bit of bloodletting and there's a bit of straight talking, I think that either is going to define you going forward, or you're going to regress or just not take on the challenge. And I think sometimes, obviously, I don't think they're that much better or improved with the win last Sunday, but I do think that sometimes the hurt maybe can be let out some way, and I think that's probably what Cork, maybe if there was doubts in their minds about are they good enough to come back from last year's defeat? Are they good enough to be in an All-Ireland final? That's just an endorsement for them as a group. That's an endorsement for the management to say, yeah, look, we are plenty good enough. Will Limerick present a bigger challenge than that down the line? They probably will, without a doubt. We'll have to be better. But I think if you're looking for little shoots of encouragement, yeah, we're well good enough to take on Limerick. We're well good enough to go up to their backyard. And I think Cork have done that a number of times. Even in Munster Championship in the last 6 or 7 years, they've shown they're capable of going up to Limerick and getting a performance. And even some in Limerick would feel that Cork are that they're kind of a bogey team for Limerick historically. But Kieran Kingston will be happy with the performance. He'll be happy with the endeavour. They look to be in good nick, so they're in a good place. But look, there's only one thing that Cork can do, unfortunately, that's going to maybe put all this to bed, and that's they have to win Liam McCarthy. It's as simple as that, unfortunately, for them. Yeah, and they have a good young squad there.
We do all want to read a lot in, but we were looking back, and 2009 league, Waterford defeated Kilkenny at Walsh Park, which was after the 2008 final. Maybe Waterford were in a similar position to Cork. I'm wondering, was that worth that to Waterford? What did that mean in the Kilkenny dressing room afterwards?
I was particularly stung because it was one of the two times I was captain of Kilkenny, Nate. So thanks for bringing up that. I can remember the day as well. I think, look, you are going to get a reaction, and that's just the way sport is. That when you get hurt by a certain team and you maybe didn't do yourself justice, I think there's definitely you want to kind of make amends for it. Yeah, it's not going to make up for it, but it's a confidence builder really more than anything else. And yeah, look, at the time, I suppose we were just all driven every day we went out. So I think afterwards, I know I was personally very disappointed with that, but Waterford had a real snap about them, and I think there was similarities in how Cork played last weekend. Waterford were really organised that day. I think I was marking Brick Walsh. He sat very deep in the 45. The midfielders were back. And again, I remember when we played them in the semi-final later that year, the All-Ireland semi-final, I ended up marking them again towards the end of that match. And I remember trying to draw him out, trying to go off out deep out the field to bring him out of there. But yeah, look, there is, like I said, there's little similarities there. But I think Cork are probably, they should be mature enough now. And I think Kieran Kingston certainly is, to say, look, lads, we'll take that. It's a great one for a foundation going forward. But let's progress from that. Let's not dwell on that.
The captaincy was something you took seriously.
Yeah, it is, Nate. And you would. I didn't get it too often. I think the week before we might have played Antrim up in Cushendall or to somewhere off up I think we could almost see the Giants Causeway, and there was a great atmosphere that day, and we won. But the following week was brought back down to earth. But it was normal service maybe after that when the Ballyhale lads were back after that, I think. But yeah, no, look, I think there is a responsibility. There's responsibility anyway, but when you get that kind of an honour as well, I remember personally that day, it definitely stung me for the few days and maybe weeks after that you just felt when you do take on that role that you have to be, you have to make it happen. And just, I know myself that day it wasn't. But look, all down to experience. So I was glad to let Henry or someone else take on that.
Cody didn't take in then. It wasn't a case of you're never getting that armband again. It was just the Ballyhale lads were returning.
No, I was hoping he'd overturn the old rule in Kilkenny where the county champions, but he was
you'd make such an impression in your 2 goals that he'd think, actually, let's rip it all up.
Yeah, let's reinvent the wheel here. Oh no, God, no. He knew the Village were a decent team coming along as well.
Let's talk about Wexford. Sort of another team who've won all their matches so far. They beat Limerick, Clare and Galway. New management team, Tipperary's Dara Egan is in, replacing Davy Fitz. From what you've seen of Wexford so far, what's the main change that Dara Egan has brought about?
I think he's probably taken off the handbrake a little bit. He's probably... I think Wexford had a certain management style and a way of playing for the last while, and I think it was fairly prescriptive. I would feel, in my opinion, it was prescriptive enough. There was a set way that they played, and they played that way, and lads had certain roles, and I think with some of those roles there was probably limitations on what they could do. But I think, look, it worked to a point. It got them to a certain point, and I think they probably hit rock bottom in 2020 when Clare knocked them out of the championship, albeit during COVID times. But they just seem to be a little bit energised at the moment. I think, from what I understand, Dara Egan and his management team haven't flogged them so far. And I think if you look at Wexford's conditioning over the last 5 or 6 years, with Davy Fitzgerald, they've probably done heavy fitness. So that's in the bank. So they don't need to, go after that. I think they can top that up a little bit and measure it, engage it, and obviously be fresh. But they just seem to be hurling a little bit more direct. I think you can see lads are being given opportunities. Even just one case in point there, just one guy I'd like to highlight is Conor Flood seems to be playing with really good freedom there as a dynamic attacking wing back. Rory O'Connor is probably the focal point of the attack, and while Conor McDonald maybe has missed a game or two, he seems to be being hit with more direct balls. So they seem to be able to play the system. They seem to be able to play the ball out short, but they seem to be, for me, going a little bit more direct with it. They have good skills. They have a good strong squad there, and I think they're in a really good place going into it. They've Offaly the weekend. They should get through there. It might be an opportunity even for them. And I mean this respectfully, is for Dara to give a few more lads. They haven't got a spin to go. And then obviously at the end of it, they're facing into Cork, but they're looking at, a league semi-final at this stage. And, I think Dara Egan will obviously want to be the championship performance, but would he take a league title? I think they would. I think Wexford would love a league title.
Like that change in style and system is probably needed as well, I presume, for the players. That bit of freshness, actually, the system that Davy implemented brought them to where he, nearly to where he wanted them to be. But actually, after a few years of that, you just need to be able to probably just be let loose.
Yeah, I think that's it. Let go. I mean, they've a lot of stuff in the bank. Like I said, the fitness is there and how to play systems. I think they would have done a lot of analysis and stuff like that. So these guys are well programmed. So they're up to the pace. They know what they're about, and it's just maybe tweaking things a little bit more. Maybe it's going a little bit more direct and saying to lads to actually go and hurl. I think after 2019 they were on the brink, and I think maybe with what happened in 20 and maybe to a lesser extent last year, people felt okay, they're going to fizzle out. I actually think they're probably closer than ever this year, and I think they're going to maybe get an opportunity. I mean, if they look around in Leinster, what have they to fear, really? Yes, they're up against, strong Dublin, strong Kilkenny, strong Galway teams, but they've shown over the last 4 or 5 years that they're well able to dance with the biggest of the teams in Leinster. They've won a Leinster title and that. So,
and is there any line on the pitch you'd look at and think actually that's the one area maybe they're a little bit off?
It's hard to know. I think what they might be lacking at times is real out and out solid defending cornerbacks. I think, Shane Reck and these lads, they're good lads, Simon Donoghue, really good players. But I think what they have to be able to do, I mean, we know they can hurl, we know they can carry the ball through the lines and maraud up and down the field. But I think on the days that they've fallen short, they have been porous. So I think your primary function has to be for some of those guys is, and I think Liam Ryan is central to that. I think even having Matty Hanlon back fully fit, and he looks fit, But I think if they can shut down opposition teams and be really mean, around the goal and say, look, we're not going to cough up easy scores, they definitely have the firepower up front. I think Rory O'Connor is in brilliant form, and if he can maintain that form going into the championship, I think he's going to be a headache for a lot of teams. And again, throwing Conor Mack with that and Paddy Foley being back, I think is a huge addition as well. So they're in a good place at the moment, and I'm not saying that trying to blow them up either, Nate.
But one of those counties that momentum is really important, isn't it? In a county like Wexford, actually, suddenly you get a few wins. There's a buzz, there's an excitement, and they can feed off that. Like they fed off it under Davy, they can feed off it again, as you say, going into what looks like a pretty wide open Leinster Championship.
It is, and Wexford, look, we've said it before, they do love their hurling, they're very passionate and they're brilliant to support their team. They've had a couple of good tastes at glory in recent years, so they won't be found wanting in terms of supporting their team. And look, I think if you were to turn around and look at both them, and I think even Dublin is another team you could throw into that mix and say they're two teams that are heading into the championship, and I think I won't be shocked if you've seen either of them in an All-Ireland semi-final this year. I just would not be shocked to see one of them making the Dublin or making great strides there as well. I think Matty Kenny has a really good, strong panel there, and so do Wexford. So I'm not being the cute Kilkenny who are here now and blowing them all up, Nate. So I just
you're moving them down the rankings bit by bit. What are they, the fifth best county in Leinster right now?
Oh yeah, they're thereabouts anyway. So
just before we move on to Dublin, Darragh Egan made a couple of interesting appointments to his backroom team. Billy Walsh and Gordon Darcy are both involved, and hard to figure out exactly what they're doing. I know Gordon Darcy was on Wednesday Night Rugby a couple of weeks ago and was quite reticent in talking about what his role was exactly. I'm interested in, like, you've been involved in the inter-county management game, as to what you feel figures like that can bring, because it doesn't feel like a dressing room like Kilkenny would have ever needed figures and big names like that to go in and make an impact. But maybe in counties that are just still waiting for that bit of success, actually, are just starting out, that a big name such as a Billy Walsh with his reputation and a Gordon Darcy and all his experience, that they can just bring something to the younger members of the squad.
Yeah, it is, and I think, look, you won't get a more passionate Wexford man than Billy Walsh, to be fair to him. He has been involved down there a long time and in previous setups. So I don't know him. I might have ran into him once, but by all accounts, he's a very positive guy, very influential and kind of energetic, I suppose, in his interactions with lads. And I think what it is he's a real positive guy. So if you were to say maybe there's an area that is maybe preventing, or could be the last hurdle for a team like Wexford jumping, it's actually that little bit of inner belief, that little bit of confidence to actually not be afraid when you're coming down the straight. And I think, for whatever reason, and we spoke about 19, they just maybe hadn't that killer instinct, or maybe that just little bit of belief in themselves to see that match out, to kick on when they were 5 points up against Tip and see the job out and kick for the line. And maybe it's just something like that. I'm not altogether sure on what exactly Gordon Darcy's functioning there. But again, in terms of maybe performance, coming from, maybe the Leinster background of where they were knocking on the door for a while and then actually making that step up and getting over the line and then becoming, obviously a top team. So he's probably sharing that experience with them. And I think in a group like that, he's definitely not going to go in there and interfere with the hurling coaching side of things. I don't think he would even try to. But it could be just maybe little one-on-ones with players, maybe an odd little submission here and there, and I'm presuming that's the role. Maybe is that he's there to work with guys in one-on-one or whatever else it is. But I'm not. Look, I don't know. I think I would have no worries about looking at something like that. I think if you as the manager feel it's a fit and it's going to benefit the players, it's not going to I suppose interfere with anything in a negative way. I think if your gut instinct and you feel there's something to be got out of that, it's a little edge, then there's nothing wrong with that. I'd be for that if you feel it's the right thing to do, if the players are happy with that.
You mentioned Dublin there under Matty Kenny. So 3 games in, they drew first day out with Waterford, then did a win over Antrim and then beat Tipperary last time out. We've been talking about Dublin quite a bit, even for the last couple of years, and what might have been if some of those footballers were hurlers, and particularly around Conor Callahan and Tommy Welch was on a couple of years ago saying Conor Callahan might be the best hurler in the country. Never mind being the best footballer in the country, he might be the best hurler in the country as well. You've been coaching him at club level with Coola for what, last year, 18 months. How good is he?
Yeah, he's a good lad. He's a really good lad.
As a hurler?
As a hurler, yeah. No, he's a good lad. I think if I'm to be utterly critical, I think if Conor Callahan is to be as good a hurler as he can be, and I think he can be a really, really top hurler, he probably has to be playing hurling week in, week out. I think it's phenomenal what he has been able to do with Coola, bearing in mind that he's playing football the whole time and then dipping into hurling. In terms of his game smarts and intelligence, really good. He's really, really good. And I think he'd be quick. He knows how to use his body. He's technically really, really good. And I watched him a few nights really closely in training. And just everything he does has purpose. Everything he does has a method to it. He knows what he's doing. If he's moving out to the wing, he's drawing out the fullback with him, knowing that he's leaving a gap inside and that he'll come back in or try to get on the end of that, or at the very least he's taking the fullback out because the fullback is going, I can't leave Con loose out there. So there's that type of, all his experience with playing with them Dublin footballers will help. But obviously I do think he has to be playing hurling week in, week out, day in, day out. I do think I would support the arguments. I would love to see him playing with Dublin hurlers. But I think he would add to what, Matty Kenny has a really strong squad. And just on that, I think if anybody can maybe swing Con, it's probably Matty Kenny. So I don't know, has there conversations? I don't know what the story is. I genuinely don't. But you'd like to think that from a Dublin hurling perspective, definitely it's something that Matty Kenny surely explored.
You've got a glint in your eye there, Eddie. You've got a glint in your eye. Tommy was saying you've got to Snapchat him, Instagram him, DM him, WhatsApp him, you name it, every single day. Jesus, it will be transformative probably for both the football championship and the hurling championship.
Yeah.
Do you think the dip of the footballers and the improvement of the hurlers means it could be a possibility?
Oh, it could well be. Who knows? And I won't lie to you, I have tried to delve a little bit into this, and there's no info going. But if I was Matty Kenny and I was in his shoes, I would be definitely going after him. I definitely would love to see him there. In 2017, I was involved with the Kilkenny 21s, and I was never more relieved going into the first round of the Leinster Championship to hear that he wouldn't be playing. Because he's just so direct. He's well conditioned. As I said, he's a very smart player. He's well drilled. He's well programmed at this stage. He knows what he's doing. But if I was there, definitely, I think from a squad point of view, he has a really good squad there at the moment. And would Conor Callahan add to that? I definitely think he would. In my opinion, last year when they played Cork in the quarter-final, they were very close. They were very close to Cork, and that was minus Owen O'Donnell and that was minus Conor Callahan. So they would be two massive additions to that Dublin team at the moment.
Wait and see is what you're saying.
Wait and see. Hopefully it'd be brilliant for hurling. I'd love it. He's achieved everything in football.
Yeah.
So
and you're saying
go play hurling.
we are talking in complete hypotheticals here, because there's very little to actually suggest it would happen. But if it was suddenly I'm going to give it a go this summer, is that too short a time for him to expect him to make any sort of an impact?
Nothing to shock me with him. I think we've seen before when he plays hurling, he is that good. And I think in a couple of weeks, or even in 4, 5, 6 weeks, he would really benefit from that. But I will say the county level is a massive level. It's those little the finesse of touch and all that. That's the thing that will separate him. And I think if he would work, he's a very dedicated guy. If he got cracking at that, I'd have no fear of him. But I suppose, look, the question is, to be fair, I think if you're starting out at the start of the season, I think as a manager, you want to have all your players committed and in and part of the group. I think the one thing you want is that everyone is happy with stuff like that. And I think they're the little things that maybe you say, could it have an impact if he was to come in, would have done certain things or anything like that. And I don't mean that in a bad way or anything like that. You'd imagine people would be happy to have him in there. But look, I'm sure maybe if he's in the ball alley the whole time, you throw him into a match or two and you won't be long finding out where he's at.
Right. You mentioned his relationship with Matty Kenny, and through your work with Coola, I'm sure you've heard a lot of stories of Matty Kenny's impact. And actually, Tommy Welsh was on yesterday morning talking about Dublin, and we haven't really taken COVID into account from a coach's point of view, and the restrictions that were on training sessions and being in dressing rooms. And if you're a good man-to-man manager, it's probably had a bigger impact. And that performance against Cork last year probably just about did enough to get Matty Kenny another year at Dublin. I wonder if you think actually the stability that's there now, the years he has under his belt, that maybe a full proper winter into the spring with these players means actually they get the full Matty Kenny experience, and we get a different Dublin out of that.
Yeah, it is, because it's over time and over the dirty nights in winter that you sit down and have a bit of grub after you've been out in the cold pitch and you got wet during the training session, and it's those cold nights that you get to sit down and find out what guys are like, and as a manager you're watching that, so to be able to sit down and have a little chat with them, that's where you build your relationships. And COVID definitely has robbed all of us of that, and it does present a huge challenge, because the more you're sitting down with lads, the more you're working together, the more time you spend together, the better and the stronger those relationships are. So from Matty's point of view, I think it was a natural progression that after all his success with Coola, that he would get the Dublin job. And I'm sure, look, Matty himself was probably even having doubts, maybe coming into last year's, campaign or whatever. And if, there's question marks he had over the winter, I think it has been a ringing endorsement that, it's a good thing he has set on. It's a good thing that Dublin Hurling has kept him there, because they have the Walsh Cup in the bag, a very, comprehensive win in the Walsh Cup final. And yeah, that won't matter later on in the year, but it's important. It's a great foundation to be heading into a league campaign that they're flying. And again, the weekends, it's another good challenge for them in their own patch. Would they love to get to another league final and win it? I'm sure they would. So all in all, I think Dublin are in a really good place, and you'd have to take your hat off and say, look, Matty Kenny has done a really, really good job.
Eddie, great stuff as always.
No bother, man. All the best, Nathan.
Eddie Brennan there, looking and chatting about the Allianz Hurling League so far. Full round of games. We'll obviously have full coverage on Off the Ball over the course of the weekend. Still scoreless in the FA Cup. Everton against non-league Boreham Wood. There is around 20 minutes gone in that one at Goodison Park.